This is more than just a story about a stray dog. It's a tale of unexpected loyalty and compassion. Witness the incredible connection that blossoms between a homeless man and a dog who bravely defended him, proving that kindness can bloom in the most unlikely places. The wind, a bitter, relentless phantom, howled through the concrete canyons of the city, carrying with it flurries of snow that stung any exposed skin. It was the kind of cold that seeped into bones, making the vibrant neon signs and the distant laughter from warm restaurants feel like scenes from another, more benevolent world. For Arthur, huddled in the recessed doorway of a closed bakery, this world was a cruel, indifferent stage for his daily struggle. His thin, threadbare coat and layers of newspaper offered scant protection against the January chill. He was a man forgotten, a ghost in the urban machine, his presence as fleeting and ignored as the discarded food wrappers that skittered past him. A few blocks away, another solitary figure navigated the icy labyrinth of alleyways. This one, however, was furred and four-legged. He was a dog, a scruffy terrier mixed with matted, dun-colored fur, ribs starkly visible beneath his hide. His amber eyes, usually bright with a dog's innate curiosity, were clouded with weariness and hunger. He'd been on his own for weeks, ever since, well, he didn't dwell on the ever since. Survival was a more pressing concern. He sniffed at overflowing bins, finding nothing but the inedible detritus of city life. The cold was gnawing at him, making his paws ache and his body tremble uncontrollably. He needed shelter, a respite from the biting wind. Drawn by an almost imperceptible pocket of slightly less frigid air, the dog limped down a side street, his nose twitching. He caught the faint, stale scent of bread and something else, human. He approached cautiously, low to the ground, every sense on high alert. The doorway was deep, offering a break from the worst of the wind. And there, curled up against the brick, was a human shape. Arthur, lost in a numb doze, was startled by a soft whine. He cracked an eye open, his heart giving a fearful lurch. Trouble, he thought. Always trouble. But what he saw was not a threat. It was a dog, small and shivering, its tail tucked so far between its legs it was almost invisible. The creature looked as wretched and cold as Arthur felt. The dog whined again, a low, pleading sound, and took a hesitant step closer, then another, until it was just at the edge of Arthur's makeshift newspaper bed. It looked at him with an expression of such profound misery that it chipped away at the wall of indifference Arthur had built around his heart. For a long moment, they simply regarded each other, two outcasts, brought together by the shared cruelty of a winter night. Arthur slowly lifted a corner of his newspaper and ragged blanket. "Well, come on then," he rasped, his voice hoarse from disuse and the cold. "No sense in both of us freezing to death separately." The dog hesitated for only a second more before cautiously creeping into the small space, nudging under the layers. Its small body was trembling violently, but it pressed against Arthur, a fragile warmth against his own chilled frame. Arthur slowly, awkwardly, patted its head. The fur was rough and dirty, but the simple act of contact, of offering comfort, was something he hadn't experienced in what felt like a lifetime. This was the moment their unlikely journey began, in the cold, unforgiving heart of the city. They spent a few days in this fragile symbiosis. Arthur would scavenge what he could, always keeping an eye out for scraps the dog might eat. The dog, whom Arthur had started calling Shadow because he stuck so close, would stay by his side, a silent, watchful companion. The presence of another living being, even a canine one, had eased the crushing weight of Arthur's loneliness. He found himself talking to Shadow, quiet murmurs about the weather, about the passers-by, about nothing in particular. Shadow would listen, his head cocked, occasionally licking Arthur's chapped hand. One evening, as dusk bled into the frigid night, Arthur had managed to secure half a discarded sandwich and a small, bruised apple. He was about to share it with Shadow in their usual doorway when he heard them, the heavy footfalls, the boisterous, cruel laughter. His blood ran cold. He knew that sound. It was a gang of youths who roamed this part of the city, preying on the vulnerable for sport. Well, what do we got here?" A sneering voice cut through the twilight. Three figures loomed at the entrance to the alley that led to their doorway, silhouetted against the streetlights. They were young, but their faces were hard, their eyes gleaming with malice. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs. He instinctively pulled Shadow closer, trying to shield him. "Nothing you'd want," Arthur said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Just move along." "Oh, I think we do." Another one chuckled, stepping forward. He had a metal pipe in his hand, tapping it idly against his palm. "Looks like you found yourself a little rat, old man. Maybe we can have some fun with it." Fear, stark and primal, gripped Arthur. He wasn't afraid for himself. He'd endured beatings before. But Shadow, the thought of them hurting the little dog was unbearable. He tensed, ready to try and fight, to do anything to protect his small companion. But before Arthur could react, something extraordinary happened. Shadow, who usually cowered from loud noises and sudden movements, launched himself forward. He was a furry brown blur, a miniature whirlwind of righteous fury. He didn't reach the youths, but he landed a few feet in front of them, his small body bristling, teeth bared in a terrifying snarl that seemed far too ferocious for his size. A deep, guttural growl ripped from his chest, echoing in the narrow space. He barked, sharp, explosive sounds, snapping at the air, a tiny, valiant defender. The youths, who had been swaggering with confidence, stopped dead in their tracks. They hadn't expected this. A homeless man, yes. A cowering stray, perhaps. But not this fearless, snarling protector. The sheer, unexpected ferocity of the little dog startled them. "What the hell?" One of them stammered, taking a step back. "Crazy mutt," another exclaimed, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Shadow advanced another step, barking relentlessly, his gaze fixed on the leader with the pipe. He was a David facing 3 Goliaths, and he wasn't backing down. The leader, unnerved by the dog's unwavering aggression and perhaps unwilling to risk a bite from a potentially rabid animal, made a decision. Forget it. He ain't worth it. Let's go find some easier pickings." He gestured, and the 3 of them retreated, casting nervous glances back at the still barking dog. Once they were gone, their footsteps fading into the city's hum, Shadow's barks slowly subsided. He turned, panting, and looked up at Arthur, a low whine escaping him. He trotted back and licked Arthur's hand, then pressed against his leg, trembling slightly from the adrenaline. Arthur was stunned. He reached down and scooped the little dog into his arms, holding him tight. "You saved me, Shadow," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You brave, brave little dog. You saved us." He buried his face in Shadow's scruffy fur, oblivious to the dirt and the smell. In that moment, the dog wasn't just a stray. He was a hero, a guardian. The fear was replaced by an overwhelming wave of gratitude and a burgeoning, fierce affection. The bond, already forming in shared hardship, was now forged in the crucible of danger, unbreakable and profound. In the aftermath of the attack, the dynamic between Arthur and Shadow shifted subtly, yet significantly. The dog, having proven his mettle, seemed to carry himself with a newfound, quiet confidence. He was no longer just a recipient of Arthur's scarce charity. He was a protector, an equal partner in their shared existence. He stayed even closer to Arthur, a constant, warm presence, his amber eyes often fixed on the older man with an expression of unwavering loyalty. Arthur, in turn, felt a responsibility that transcended mere companionship. This little creature had risked everything for him. That night, huddled back in their doorway, the remnants of the fear still lingered in the air, but so did a powerful sense of connection. Arthur carefully unwrapped the half sandwich he had managed to save. It was simple fare, stale bread, a smear of some unidentifiable paste, a wilted piece of lettuce. Before, he might have given Shadow the crusts. Tonight was different. He broke the sandwich meticulously in half. "Here you go, hero," he murmured, offering one piece to Shadow. The dog looked up at him, then at the offering, and gently took it from Arthur's fingers. They ate in companionable silence, the city's cacophony a distant backdrop to their quiet communion. Arthur then peeled the bruised apple, cutting away the bad spots, and shared that too, small slice by small slice. It was a meager meal, barely enough to stave off the worst of their hunger, but it felt like a feast. Sharing this simple food, after Shadow's act of bravery, was a ritual, an acknowledgement of their bond. Arthur found himself stroking Shadow's fur, not just a quick pat, but long, soothing strokes. Shadow leaned into his touch, his tail giving a soft thump-thump against the cardboard. "You know, Shadow," Arthur said softly, the words emerging more easily than they had in years. "I haven't had anyone look out for me like that in, well, a very long time. Most people, they just look through me. Or worse, they look at me like I'm something they scraped off their shoe." He paused, his gaze distant. "I was a soldier once. A long time ago. We were supposed to look out for each other. Didn't always work out that way." Shadow whined softly, as if understanding, and licked Arthur's hand. "But you," Arthur continued, his voice softening, "you didn't hesitate. Little fella like you, taking on those thugs." A rare, genuine smile touched his lips. "You've got more courage in that little body than most men I've known." As the days turned into weeks, their routine settled. Arthur became more adept at finding sheltered spots, always with Shadow's comfort in mind. He'd find discarded blankets or pieces of thick cardboard to create a warmer nest for them. He talked to Shadow constantly, narrating their day, sharing observations, even confessing old regrets and faded dreams. Shadow was the perfect confidant. He never judged, never interrupted, only offered his silent, unwavering presence and the occasional comforting nuzzle. One afternoon, Arthur managed to get a few dollars by helping a shopkeeper carry some heavy boxes. Instead of spending it all on a hot meal for himself, his first thought was Shadow. He bought a can of cheap dog food and a small, stale bread roll. Finding a quiet spot in a small, neglected park, he opened the can with his pocket knife. The delight in Shadow's eyes, the enthusiastic way he lapped up the food, brought a warmth to Arthur's chest that no amount of hot coffee could have. This shared experience, the simple act of giving and receiving, the mutual reliance, deepened their connection into something akin to family. Arthur, who had felt utterly alone and invisible for so long, now had a purpose beyond his own survival. He had Shadow to care for, Shadow who trusted him implicitly, Shadow who had shown him a loyalty purer than any he had ever known. And Shadow, the abandoned stray, had found not just a provider, but a companion, a steady presence in a chaotic world. Their trust was unbreakable, a silent vow made in shared doorways and sealed with shared scraps, a powerful testament to a bond that transcended species, circumstance, and the harsh indifference of the city. The harsh winter began to reluctantly loosen its grip, replaced by the hesitant thaw of early spring. Puddles replaced ice patches, and the biting wind carried the faintest scent of damp earth and distant blossoms. For Arthur and Shadow, life remained a daily challenge, but the slightly warmer temperatures made a fraction more bearable. Shadow's coat was still scruffy, but with Arthur's occasional attempts at grooming with his fingers and the slightly better food scraps they sometimes found, he looked less like a desperate stray and more like a well-loved, if unconventional, pet. Arthur had started to think beyond just the next meal, the next sheltered doorway. The thought of subjecting Shadow to another brutal winter on the streets was a heavy weight on his mind. He had to do something, find something more permanent, not just for himself, but for the brave little dog who had become his entire world. One afternoon, as they sat on a park bench, sharing a discarded hot dog bun Arthur had found, a woman approached them. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile. She wasn't dressed extravagantly, but she carried an air of quiet purpose. In her hand was a leash. "Hello," she said softly, her gaze taking in both Arthur and Shadow. "He's a beautiful dog. What's his name?" Arthur, usually wary of strangers, felt a surprising lack of suspicion. There was no pity in her eyes, only a genuine interest. "His name's Shadow," Arthur replied, his hand resting on the dog's head. Shadow, after an initial wary sniff, seemed to relax under her calm demeanor. "I'm Sarah," the woman said. "I volunteer with a local animal rescue. We try to help strays and, well, people and their pets who might be having a tough time." She gestured vaguely to their surroundings. "We sometimes have foster homes available, or we can help with food and vet care." Arthur's heart clenched. The thought of parting with Shadow, even to a good home, was painful. But the idea of vet care, of a warm place for Shadow, was undeniably tempting. "He's not a stray, not anymore," Arthur said, a protective note in his voice. "He's with me." Sarah nodded, understanding. "I can see you take good care of him. He looks very devoted to you." She paused. "We also sometimes hear about temporary work, odd jobs, things like that. And we have connections with shelters that are pet-friendly, though they're often full. It's not much, but..." A flicker of hope ignited within Arthur. "Pet-friendly shelters?" he asked. He hadn't known such places existed. Most shelters he knew of had strict no-pet policies. "Yes, a few," Sarah confirmed. "And sometimes, if someone is trying to get back on their feet, we can help foster their pet temporarily until they find stable housing." Over the next few days, Sarah became a regular, if brief, visitor. She'd bring a small bag of dog biscuits for Shadow and chat with Arthur. She never pushed, never judged. She simply offered resources, information, a friendly face. She told him about a day labor agency that sometimes had work and about a small, lesser-known shelter on the outskirts of the city that allowed residents to keep their pets if they were well-behaved, and the owner took full responsibility. The decision was monumental. To re-enter society, even at its fringes, was daunting, but the thought of providing a real roof over Shadow's head, a place where he wouldn't shiver through the night, was a powerful motivator. With Sarah's encouragement, Arthur visited the day labor agency. He was older than most of the men there, his clothes worn, but he was sober, polite, and willing to work. He got a few days' work unloading trucks. Hard, physical labor that left him aching, but with precious cash in his pocket. His first priority was Shadow. He bought a sturdy collar and leash, more dog food, a better quality this time, and even a small, soft blanket. Then, with Sarah's help navigating the bureaucracy, he applied for a spot at the pet-friendly shelter. There was a waiting list, but his veteran status and Sarah's quiet advocacy helped. A week later, the call came. A spot had opened up. Walking towards the shelter, with Shadow trotting happily on his new leash, Arthur felt a mix of trepidation and exhilaration. It wasn't a palace. It was a simple, functional building, clean but basic. But it had a bed for him and a designated spot on the floor for Shadow, right beside him. It had hot meals and showers. It was, for the first time in years, a place he could call a temporary home. That first night, lying on a thin mattress, with Shadow curled up on his blanket beside him, a quiet snuffling sound his only lullaby, Arthur felt a profound sense of peace. It wasn't just a shelter from the cold. It was a shelter from despair. Shadow, by simply existing, by his unwavering loyalty and bravery, had been the catalyst. He had nudged Arthur out of his apathy, given him a reason to strive for something more. The small dog, who had sought only warmth on a cold night, had inadvertently found Arthur a path back towards dignity and hope. Their story, unfolding in the quiet corners of the city, was a testament to unexpected kindness, both from a scruffy terrier mix and from a compassionate stranger. The impact of Shadow's bravery and Arthur's reciprocal generosity was slowly beginning to ripple outwards, a quiet beacon of hope in a world that often felt bleak. Arthur knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was not an end, but a new beginning for both of them. The shelter provided a crucial stepping stone. Having a fixed address, however temporary, and the ability to clean himself up properly, opened doors that had long been bolted shut for Arthur. He continued to pick up day labor jobs, saving every penny he could. Shadow, meanwhile, became a quiet celebrity at the shelter. His gentle nature and obvious devotion to Arthur charmed staff and residents alike. He was a furry, four-legged reminder that love and loyalty could flourish even in the most challenging circumstances. Arthur's military background, though distant, had instilled in him a discipline and reliability that employers, even for temporary gigs, appreciated. One of the foremen at a warehouse where he frequently worked noticed his diligence. "You're a good worker, Arthur," he said one day. "Reliable. We might have something more permanent coming up, if you're interested. It's still physical, but it's steady." The offer was like a lifeline. Steady work meant a steady income. It meant the possibility of eventually leaving the shelter, of finding a small place of their own. Arthur accepted with heartfelt gratitude. The job was demanding, but Arthur attacked it with a vigor he hadn't felt in years. Every aching muscle, Every drop of sweat was a step closer to a better life for himself and Shadow. He'd return to the shelter each evening, tired but satisfied, to Shadow's ecstatic greeting, tail wagging so hard his whole body wiggled, happy yips and a flurry of licks. These moments were his greatest reward. Months passed. Arthur saved diligently. He opened a small bank account. He bought Shadow a proper dog bed, a warm coat for the colder evenings, and even a few chew toys. He started to look less like a man beaten down by life, and more like a man with a quiet purpose. The lines of hardship on his face remained, but his eyes held a new light, a reflection of the hope Shadow had sparked within him. Sarah, the animal rescue volunteer, still checked in occasionally. She was thrilled by Arthur's progress. "You've done so well, Arthur," she'd say, smiling as Shadow leaned contentedly against her legs for a scratch behind the ears. "You both have." It was Shadow, Arthur would always reply, his voice thick with emotion. He gave me a reason. He showed me what unconditional love looks like. And it was true. Shadow's love was a constant, unwavering force. It didn't matter if Arthur was tired, or grumpy, or had a bad day. Shadow's affection never wavered. He asked for nothing but companionship, a full belly, and a warm place to sleep beside his human. He offered, in return, his whole heart, his fierce loyalty, and a comforting presence that had mended parts of Arthur that he thought were broken beyond repair. The bond between them was a powerful, visible thing. Other residents of the shelter, many of whom were struggling with their own demons of loneliness and loss, would often stop to pet Shadow, to watch him play, to see the gentle way Arthur spoke to him. It was a small, daily reminder of the deep, healing connection possible between humans and animals. It was a testament to the fact that love didn't care about societal status, bank balances, or past mistakes. It simply was. Finally, the day came. Arthur had saved enough for a deposit on a small, one-room apartment in a modest but clean building. It wasn't much, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom, and a main room that would serve as both living area and bedroom. But it was theirs. The landlord, an elderly woman who had a soft spot for dogs, had been touched by Arthur's story and Shadow's impeccable behavior during their interview. The first night in their new home was quiet. Arthur had bought a second-hand armchair and a small mattress. Shadow had his bed, placed right next to Arthur's. After a simple meal of canned stew for Arthur and dog food for Shadow, Arthur sat in the armchair, Shadow's head resting on his knee. The city lights twinkled outside the small window. "We did it, old boy," Arthur whispered, stroking Shadow's soft ears. "We got a home." Shadow looked up at him, his amber eyes full of adoration, and gave a contented sigh, thumping his tail gently on the worn linoleum floor. Their story was not one of grand riches or dramatic societal ascent. It was a quieter, more profound victory. It was about the rediscovery of dignity, the rebuilding of a life, piece by painstaking piece. It was about the incredible, transformative power of unconditional love, freely given by a scruffy stray dog who saw past a man's destitution to the heart beneath. Arthur often thought back to that first, freezing night in the doorway. He had been at his lowest ebb, a forgotten man. And then, a small, shivering dog had stumbled into his life, seeking only shelter, and had ended up offering salvation. Shadow hadn't just saved him from physical attack. He had saved Arthur from the crippling despair that had held him captive for so long. Their journey was a testament to the resilience of the spirit, both human and animal. It was a reminder that kindness can be found in the most unexpected places, and that the deepest connections often form across the most profound differences. The love between a once homeless man and his devoted dog was a quiet beacon, radiating a message of hope. That even in the face of adversity, compassion can flourish, and love, in its purest, most unconditional form, truly has the power to heal, to transform, and to build a life worth living.